How's it going, everybody? It's Tactard Ted. It is Monday, the 3rd day of October. And how's everybody going? Have you heard the news? The Russians have lost Krasny Limon, or Limon, as the Ukrainians call it. And it's definitely, absolutely, positively curtains for the Russians. The Russians have failed miserably. They have lost Limon. This is so terrible. It is the most tactically significant city on the entire front. Interesting how things change. See, I remember things. It's important to remember things. And I remember a couple months ago when the Russians took Limon, or Krasny Limon as the Russians call it. There was zero mention of it in the Western press. In fact, the Western press didn't think it was worthy of mentioning. It wasn't a big deal. Didn't care. Not a big deal. Just another little town. Not even a major city. Not a big deal. The Russians got it. Big deal. But when the Ukrainians take it, oh my God, it's a major city. It's a tactically significant point on the battlefield. Why wasn't it significant when the Russians took it in the first place? It's almost like you're being lied to. You know, kind of like COVID, Russian collusion, the PIS dossier, all those things that we found that the press and the government reported to us that are absolutely bullshit. Isn't that interesting, folks? Isn't that well, didn't hear what? There's a column of 3,000 men and I think it was 120 tanks that is heading deep into Kherson. Oh, okay. And what are they going to do? They're going to go capture that bridge with the dam on it. Oh, the one that they've blown up 3 or 4 times or been trying to blow up. Oh, they blew it up, but they didn't blow it up, but then they blew it up, but then who knows? That dam? Okay, that dam that's a good distance away from the front line. Oh yeah, but they got 120 tanks. Well, actually, now it's closer to 100. Something about 10 of their tanks getting blown up like almost immediately when they stepped off, and then another 10 or so tanks. Well, don't worry, I'm sure the Russians, they're running out of missiles, they're running out of wire-guided anti-tank missiles, other than the in-laws they keep capturing from the Ukrainians. But let's not worry about that. Let's not even discuss that. That's not important. But the Ukrainians are taking ground. They're absolutely taking ground. I mean, after all, they took Krasny Limon. .900 dead, taking Krasny Limon, a town that was defended by 500 Russian troops. You might want to sink that in. The Ukrainians lost more troops trying to encircle and take Krasny Limon than were actually defending Krasny Limon. But that's got to be a tactical gain, yeah. If all things were equal and you were dealing with equal countries, it might be. But this is a war of attrition. And the Russians are absolutely fine to give ground if they can attrit the enemy. And that's what they're doing. They're allowing the Ukrainians to push in. It's easier to defend than it is to attack. And, I had a friend of mine recently say, well, what are the Russians doing? Doctrine is 3 to 1 if you're going to attack. But it's funny, and I've mentioned this before, Muhammad Ali, one of the great boxing champions, he had this tactic that he called the rope-a-dope. And he would let a guy work him into the corner, and Ali would tense everything up, get himself into a good defensive position, and just let the guy wail on him. Because while he's beating on Ali, He's expending energy. Only thing all he's doing is tensing up and waiting. And he's waiting. And he's waiting for his opponent to expend his energy, and then he come back and whoop his ass. And that is a good bit of what's going on in Ukraine, apparently. The Russians are hunkering down in defense with extreme economy of force. Lightly manned, heavily defended. And they're letting the Ukrainians attrit themselves. They're letting them come in, fight as hard as they can, and the whole time they're wearing down their strength. They're losing their numbers. The Russians aren't fighting the same kind of war that a lot of these people in the West are thinking about. Let's go back to the main aims. And you've heard me say this before. The main aims, the aims that were laid out for the special military operation, were demilitarization, denazification, and securing Donbass. In that order. The demilitarization is going on. It does not matter if they're demilitarizing the Ukrainian forces on the territory of the Donbass, or whether they're doing it in Kiev, or whether they're doing it in Lvov. Demilitarization is destroying the military. It is taking their numbers down. The denazification is the ruining of the Azov, the right sector, Adar, all those neo-Nazi formations. You and I may disagree on whether they are neo-Nazis or not. I think they're more like Nazis in the classical sense. The fact that they are xenophobic, the fact that they're almost identical to the Nazis in my case. Now, people will disagree with me. That's fine. We can disagree. One of the things that I think is most telling is these people were xenophobic. They believe that they have a destiny, that the Russians are somehow inferior to them because they're of a mixed ancestral deal. I literally had a guy who was from Western Ukraine tell me, they're inferior because the Mongols fucked their women and now they're all mixed breed. And that's honestly his words. That is what he told me. I'm not trying to be shocking. I'm not trying to be controversial. This is what was told to me from somebody from Western Ukraine. That is pretty much the birthplace of this whole Ukrainian nationalist movement, and that's how he thinks. He's not anything special. He obviously didn't think enough of Ukraine to go home and fight. He's here in the United States, but that's how he thought, and that's what he believed. And you could tell there was no bullshit about him, that he actually believed that. But as racially pure as these folks think they are, look at who's helping them. Chechen Muslims. No. They don't believe in religion. They're more than willing to knock down Russian Orthodox churches, or Orthodox churches, however you want to put that. They're more than welcome to terrorize the clergy. But who are their allies? Chechens who are members of ISIS. Now, why is that significant? Well, you need to look at the SS Handschar division that was made up of Bosnian Muslims, a large number of Bosnian Muslims. And even though the Nazis wanted to replace Christianity with their Nordic beliefs, and they wanted to absolutely do away with all the Jewish folks, the Grand Mufti of the Muslim world was tight with Hitler and talked Hitler into putting together a Muslim division, or a large unit in the Waffen-SS. The Waffen-SS, all about their purity, but they're going to allow a unit of Bosnian Muslims. Just like right sector and Azov and Adar, they're all about pure Ukrainian blood, but they'll take people from the United States. They'll take people from Poland, which is funny because Bandera killed a lot of Poles. History, if you don't read it, you don't know about it. But really, folks, you see all this nonsense going on, and you just got to laugh, because the media will tell you something's not a big deal until somebody else does it, then it's a big deal. once again, and I know I keep hammering these points, but they're worth hammering. We're terribly worried about the territorial integrity of Ukraine. The territorial Bosnia, the territorial integrity of Serbia, when it came to Bosnia and Kosovo, not so much. No. We're fine with hacking that country apart and taking pieces and dismembering it. Oh, it was great. It was fantastic. It was a NATO mission. It just absolutely great. It's fantastic. It's incredible. Oh, it's pure and happy. But when the people of Eastern Ukraine take a vote saying, hey, we don't want to be part of Ukraine anymore, then 8 years later, Russia has the audacity to recognize them and aid them, suddenly, oh, that's terrible. That's terrible. That's aggression. That's aggression on a large scale. And it's the same fucking difference. It's the same deal. You're involving yourselves internally with another country and messing. Now, if Bosnia was right, if Kosovo was right, then Donbass is right. If those weren't right, then neither is Donbass. You got to make up your mind, folks. You have to be consistent. You have to not be hypocritical. And speaking about hypocritical, there's a lot of unintentional hypocrisy going on. And a lot of that's being done because of the disinformation of the press. It's really became clear this week. A lot of the people who are more right-leaning in this country that believe in religion, family, the family unit, don't believe in sexualizing our children. Those folks are on the same page with Putin. I don't know if that surprises any of them or not. I'm sure it does, because, well, they hate Putin. Because, well, the media says he's aggressive, he's nuts, he's this, he's that. He's a former KGB officer. Yes, he is all these things, and he is just a terrible person. Well, I believe that if a lot of these people who consider themselves to be conservative-leaning were to look at things that Putin said, actually with good translations, not the translations that are done in the West, which, when a word has 3 potential meanings, they will choose the most devastating. And they will put shit in that's over the top. But I wonder how many of the religious folks in the United States would be surprised to find out that Putin's a proponent of Christianity. Now, I know some of you folks that'll turn you off. That's fine. I'm talking about the Christians in the United States. You know, they put Christianity first in their lives. It's very important. I wonder how many of these people understand that Putin's a Christian and a proponent of the church. Probably not. And I know there's a lot of people out there that believe in the family, and believe in a husband, wife, kids, the unity of the family, that the family is the basic building block of culture, of a nation. I believe it. I believe it. I believe family's important. And I think that we've made it too easy in this country to denigrate the family. And guess what? Because of the damage the Soviet Union did to the Russian culture, Vladimir Putin thinks that the family needs preserved. How many of you here in the West, how many of you Americans, my fellow countrymen, how many of you believe family is important? How many? Because you have that in common with Putin. Now, there were a bunch of laws that were passed, 6-7 years ago. I can't remember that. And I tell you, I remember things, but I can't remember exactly. And they were portrayed in the West as anti-alphabet soup, LGBTQ, whatever laws. And that's not exactly what they were. They were laws that were aimed against grooming children. You know, in this country we have, drag queen story time or whatever, where people take their children and have drag queens read to them and everything. That's not sexualizing our children. Cuties on Netflix, that wasn't sexualizing our children. Well, guess what? That shit don't cut it over in Russia. And Putin's against that. So if you're against the exploitation and sexualization of our children, you have that in common with Putin. And I don't believe that we have a real good grip on this country of just how moderate Putin really is. Putin is seen as this grand extremist. He's so extreme. He wants nothing but constant conflict with everyone. That's why it took him 8 years to enter the war on the side of Donbass. 8 years, 2014, folks. 2014. 8 years. Yeah, he's radical, all right. In fact, and I've said it before and said it again, not only are the people enthusiastic about the war in Donbass, they're still enthusiastic after this draft. And yes, there are people leaving Russia to go to Georgia or wherever. The same sort of non-committal, non-patriotic folks that we had that ran their ass to Canada during the Vietnam War. The same sort of people that had a fit during the wars here. Basically, I'm not going to get into the politics of whether the wars in Iraq or Afghanistan were right or not. And it's unfair to do so because now we are past it. Hindsight is 2020. But at the time, if you didn't want to serve, you didn't have to join up, but we had people leaving. Just the same way as most of those folks who ran across the border into Georgia or ran across the border elsewhere weren't able to be mobilized because they never served. But yet we won't report that here in our press. And we won't report that even after the draft and everything else, Putin is still 72 to 75% approval rating. Potato Joe is nowhere near that. And I think everybody might want to get a grip on this, that Putin is not the enemy. Putin's a friend of Christianity, a friend of family, and doesn't want to see kids sexualized and abused. So, who is about all those things? Well, you might want to look at your own government. Our own government. Because government help has destroyed certain family units in different segments of our culture because, well, we'll give you more money if the father's not present. We'll give you more money if you're a single parent. We'll give you more money if... What we've done is we've basically made the nuclear family disposable. It's no longer advantageous. It's no longer a good thing to be a nuclear family. And it's sad. It's really sad that we went there. And I think we all need to agree that the government in the United States right now is not looking out for your best interest. They couldn't be looking out for our best interest. If they were looking out for our best interest, they would be trying to ensure peace and tranquility throughout the world. I think one other thing that we really need to look at here before I go, and I know I ran on a little longer than I want to, but what is the rationale of Zelensky and the Ukrainians at the moment? They just lost 1/5 of their territory. Now, there were these Minsk agreements, which were backed by France and Germany, the West, and Russia. And had these Minsk agreements been put into force by the Ukrainians, the war would not be going on today, and Ukraine would still have all of its territory that it had when the war started. Now it doesn't. Now it is 1/5 smaller. And as long as this war continues, I suspect it will get much smaller. So the fact that Zelensky keeps doubling down and keeps doubling down and keeps doubling down and keeps doubling down on stupidity, oh, this is not the time to negotiate. We need to push the Russians back to negotiate. You guys don't understand. The Russians are not playing your game. The Russians are happy until you capitulate. They're happy to destroy your military piecemeal. They're willing to cede ground as long as they continue to kill Ukrainians. Everybody treats this as though it's a war of conquest or a war for territory. It's not. It hasn't been. It is a war to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. And they're demilitarizing it. The Russians now are in the process of destroying the second Ukrainian army. The first Ukrainian army that they began this war with is gone. Its equipment is gone. Its leadership is gone. And the second Ukrainian army is on a good way to being defeated. A great number of the T-72s that were given by Poland and other former Soviet bloc countries that have been saying in war reserve that we helped finance to be given to Ukraine, a good number of those are gone, and they're going to continue to go. And we're sending mothballed 113s, basically an aluminum coffin. We're sending those because we don't need them. They're no benefit to us. Hell yeah, we'll send them over there. We'll allow the Russians to expend ammunition on them. They're still going to be full of dead Ukrainians. So instead of killing one Ukrainian or a smaller crew, we're going to shove 8 or 10 into a 113 and let it get bloated up. Because we can do that. Because, hey, the Ukrainians aren't important. If they were important, Zelensky would have been put into NATO this week. He would have been put into NATO 8 years ago. Well, not Zelensky, but Ukraine. And they're not. They're not going to let them in Ukraine. But they'll continue to provide them weapons. They'll continue to provide them intelligence. They will continue to give them a lot of money. And they'll jettison the patriots in their own countries. They'll talk them into going to fight and die for Ukraine. Because they don't want patriots in their own country. Because if these patriots are in their own country, they may be a little problem a little later when the people understand just how bad the government has screwed them over, how bad the government is willing to sell them out for political gains elsewhere. And that's where you're at. But, yep, the press will lie to you about how important Krasny Limon was, and they'll trick you in to being absolutely, totally against someone who shares your values. What a wonderful world we're living in. Anyhow, folks, you take care. I'll see you on Tactard Tuesday. I don't know what I'll rant about yet. Maybe the Ukrainians will take all of Kherson in the next 24 hours. And now I can eat some crow. Because I haven't had much crow in a long time. But I will tell you, if you think that short of nuking the shit out of Russia, that somehow the West is going to take and keep the Ukrainian leaking Titanic afloat, you're fucking nuts. Anyhow, y'all take care. Bye.